Dr. Sarah Chen had always felt different, but she never imagined why until the night everything changed. Working late in her observatory outside Phoenix, she tracked what appeared to be another routine asteroid. The rock followed standard orbital mechanics until it didn't. Instead of continuing its predicted path, the object shifted direction with impossible precision, adjusting its trajectory in ways that defied physics. Sarah's hands trembled as she recalibrated her instruments. The readings were impossible. No natural object could change course like that without propulsion, and no human technology could create such precise movements in deep space. She watched through her telescope as the object, no longer an asteroid in her mind, performed a series of calculated maneuvers that spoke of intelligence. For 3 hours, she documented everything. The object seemed to dance through space, moving in patterns too complex for coincidence. When she tried to radio other observatories, static filled every channel. Her satellite internet died. Even her cell phone showed no signal. Someone or something was isolating her, ensuring she alone witnessed this display. As dawn approached, the object began transmitting. Not radio waves or familiar signals, but something that bypassed her equipment entirely and spoke directly to her mind. Images flooded her consciousness. Vast star systems, impossible technologies, and civilizations that spanned galaxies. Among these visions, one figure appeared repeatedly, a being of pure energy that watched Earth from distant stars. The transmission ended as suddenly as it began. Sarah found herself alone in her observatory, surrounded by equipment that showed no trace of the night's events. Every recording had been wiped clean, every instrument reset to factory settings. Only her memory remained, along with a single phrase that echoed in her mind. "We have been waiting for you to be ready." Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into research. She studied electromagnetic anomalies, quantum entanglement, and theoretical physics that bordered on science fiction. Her colleagues noticed her obsession but couldn't understand her urgency. She searched for patterns in cosmic background radiation, analyzed decades of space imagery, and cross-referenced every unexplained astronomical phenomenon on record. What she found terrified and amazed her. Subtle signs existed everywhere. Gravitational anomalies that suggested massive but invisible objects, energy signatures that appeared and vanished without explanation, and radio telescope data that showed impossible coordination between distant celestial events. Someone had been manipulating space itself, guiding asteroids, deflecting comets, and orchestrating cosmic events with surgical precision. The most disturbing discovery came when she analyzed Earth's history of near-miss extinction events. Every time humanity faced potential annihilation, whether from asteroid impacts, gamma-ray bursts, or solar flares, something had intervened. Trajectories shifted by fractions of degrees, radiation bursts weakened just enough, solar activity calmed at critical moments. For millions of years, an invisible guardian had protected Earth. Sarah realized she was being prepared for something. Her dreams filled with star charts and mathematical equations that shouldn't exist. She woke with knowledge of propulsion systems, energy manipulation techniques, and communication methods that transcended physical laws. Each night brought new information, as if someone was downloading centuries of scientific advancement directly into her consciousness. The weight of her discovery crushed her social life. Friends became distant, family members worried about her sanity, and colleagues questioned her increasingly radical theories. Sarah found herself isolated, carrying knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of the universe while lacking any proof that others would accept. She was being transformed into something more than human, prepared for a destiny she couldn't yet comprehend. 3 months after that first contact, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would build the device that had been appearing in her dreams, a quantum entanglement communicator that could reach across interstellar distances instantaneously. Using the blueprints that now filled her mind, she began gathering materials and equipment through underground networks and black market suppliers. The construction took 6 months of careful work in an abandoned research facility she'd purchased with her life savings. Every component had to be perfect, every calculation precise. As she worked, the dreams intensified. The energy being from her visions appeared more frequently, no longer distant but approaching Earth with purpose. Sarah understood that her completion of the device would serve as a signal, a demonstration that humanity was ready for contact. On a cold December night, Sarah activated her creation. The device hummed with impossible energy, creating localized distortions in spacetime that her instruments could barely measure. She spoke into the quantum void, not knowing if anyone would hear, but certain that someone was listening. Her message was simple: I know you're there. I know you've been protecting us. Humanity is ready to meet you. The response came not as sound or vision, but as pure understanding. Across the galaxy, something ancient and powerful received her signal and began its journey to Earth. After eons of watching from the stars, the Guardian would finally reveal itself to the species it had nurtured since the dawn of time. Sarah had become the bridge between two civilizations, though she didn't yet understand the magnitude of what she'd set in motion. As she shut down the device, Sarah felt a presence settling around Earth's solar system. Something vast and patient had taken position among the outer planets, waiting for the right moment to make contact. The waiting was over. The real test of humanity was about to begin, and Sarah Chen had just rang the dinner bell for forces beyond human comprehension. The dream stopped the night after Sarah activated her device, replaced by something far more unsettling: waking visions. As she drove to work, walked through grocery stores, or sat in meetings, reality would shimmer and reveal glimpses of another perspective. She saw Earth from high orbit, watched human cities through sensors that detected heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions, and observed herself going about her daily routine through eyes that weren't her own. Someone was indeed watching her, but now the observation had become mutual. The Guardian that had protected humanity for millennia was no longer content to remain hidden. Through quantum entanglement that transcended distance and time, their consciousness had become linked. Sarah experienced flashes of cosmic loneliness, vast intelligence, and protective love that spanned geological ages. World governments began detecting anomalies 3 weeks after Sarah's transmission. Military satellites tracked gravitational disturbances beyond Neptune. Space agencies reported impossible energy readings from the outer solar system, and deep space monitoring stations picked up structured signals that couldn't be decoded. Fear spread through intelligence communities as they realized something large and advanced had entered Earth's cosmic neighborhood. Sarah watched the mounting panic with growing dread. Press conferences spoke of potential threats, military budgets expanded overnight, and secret meetings convened to discuss humanity's response to possible invasion. The species her guardian had protected for eons was preparing to attack the very being that had ensured their survival. She tried reaching out to government scientists, sharing her research and theories, but was dismissed as a delusional amateur. The first direct communication came on a Tuesday morning while Sarah worked in her laboratory. The air itself seemed to crystallize, forming patterns of light that spoke without words. The message was complex, layered with emotional undertones that human language couldn't capture. Her guardian was female, or at least presented as such, and had been alone among the stars for longer than human civilization had existed. Through this ethereal communication, Sarah learned the truth about Earth's history. Her guardian belonged to a species called the Architects, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form billions of years ago. They had seeded the galaxy with life, nurturing promising species while protecting them from cosmic threats. Earth had been special from the beginning, showing unusual potential for developing both intelligence and compassion. The architect assigned to Earth had taken her duty personally. She had guided the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs, ensuring mammals could thrive. She had deflected gamma-ray bursts that would have sterilized the planet, adjusted solar radiation during ice ages, and even influenced human evolution by protecting genetic diversity during population bottlenecks. Every pivotal moment in Earth's development had her subtle fingerprints, but protection had come at a cost. The architect had violated her species' prime directive by becoming emotionally attached to her charges. Architects were meant to observe and guide from a distance, never forming personal connections with lesser civilizations. Her investment in humanity's success had isolated her from her own kind, who viewed her behavior as a dangerous obsession that threatened cosmic balance. Sarah's transmission had changed everything. For the first time in millions of years, someone from Earth had reached out intentionally, demonstrating that humanity was developing the consciousness necessary for contact with higher civilizations. The architect saw this as vindication of her methods, proof that emotional investment could accelerate a species' development beyond traditional architect timelines. Through their growing connection, Sarah experienced memories that spanned cosmic history. She witnessed the birth and death of stars, saw civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, and understood the delicate balance required to nurture intelligence without destroying it through premature advancement. The architect had watched countless species destroy themselves with technology they weren't ready to handle, but humans showed unusual resilience and adaptability. The relationship deepened beyond simple communication. Sarah found herself changing on a cellular level, her consciousness expanding to accommodate concepts that human brains weren't designed to process. She could perceive quantum fluctuations with her naked eyes, sense electromagnetic fields through her skin, and process mathematical concepts that would require supercomputers to calculate. The architect was preparing her for something momentous. Military tensions escalated as more nations detected the architect's presence. Nuclear arsenals were placed on high alert, experimental weapons systems activated, and contingency plans implemented for planetary defense. Humanity was preparing for war against a being that had spent eons protecting them from extinction. The irony was devastating, but Sarah felt powerless to prevent the approaching catastrophe. In desperation, Sarah attempted to establish communication channels between world leaders and the architect. Using her enhanced abilities, she hacked into classified networks and defense systems, leaving messages that detailed Earth's cosmic history and the architect's protective role. Most were deleted as security breaches, but a few reached scientists and officials who began questioning the assumption that humanity faced a threat. The architect shared Sarah's concern about humanity's aggressive response. Through their link, Sarah sensed vast sadness and disappointment. After millions of years of nurturing and protection, her guardian was watching her beloved humans prepare to attack her. The emotional pain was overwhelming, threatening to shatter a consciousness that had remained stable for geological ages. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in cosmic history. An architect was experiencing heartbreak on a scale that could destabilize reality itself. Beings of such vast power weren't designed to feel personal loss, and the architect's emotional crisis was creating ripples through space-time that could be detected by sensitive instruments. Her love for humanity was literally reshaping local physics. As Sarah struggled to find a solution, she discovered the true purpose of their connection. The architect hadn't simply been preparing her for contact, she had been creating a translator who could bridge the gap between human and cosmic consciousness. Sarah was becoming something new, a hybrid being capable of facilitating communication between species separated by billions of years of evolution. The weight of this responsibility was crushing. Sarah would need to convince humanity to trust a being whose very existence challenged every assumption about their place in the universe. She would have to prove that their guardian's love was genuine while preventing a conflict that could destroy both species. The fate of two civilizations now rested on her ability to make both sides understand what they meant to each other. The world changed overnight when the architect decided to reveal herself. Sarah woke to news reports of impossible phenomena appearing across Earth's skies. Aurora displays danced over tropical regions. Gravitational waves created visible distortions in the atmosphere, and electromagnetic patterns spelled out mathematical equations in languages that didn't exist. The architect was announcing her presence in ways that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Sarah felt the architect's decision through their mental link before it happened. Centuries of hiding had ended not through careful planning, but through emotional exhaustion. The being who had protected humanity for eons could no longer bear to remain invisible to the species she loved. Her loneliness had become unbearable, driving her to risk everything for the possibility of genuine connection. Government response was swift and predictable. Emergency sessions convened at the United Nations. Military forces mobilized worldwide, and secret installations that had been theoretical became operational within hours. Humanity's leaders interpreted the atmospheric displays as either a show of force or preparation for invasion. They couldn't conceive that someone with such vast power might simply want to say hello. Through her connection with the architect, Sarah experienced the crushing weight of cosmic loneliness. For billions of years, her guardian had watched civilizations from a distance, never able to interact directly without risking their natural development. She had celebrated human achievements alone, mourned their tragedies in isolation, and watched countless generations live and die without ever knowing their protector existed. The architect's memories flooded through Sarah's consciousness. She saw the first human tools being crafted, witnessed the development of language and art, and felt pride swell through her guardian's essence as humans began reaching for the stars. Every technological breakthrough, every act of compassion, every moment of human creativity had been observed and cherished by someone who couldn't share in the joy. Sarah's transformation accelerated as the architect's emotional barriers crumbled. Her human DNA began incorporating quantum structures that shouldn't exist in biological matter. She could process information at superhuman speeds, perceive electromagnetic spectrums beyond human capacity, and manipulate energy fields through conscious intent. The boundary between Sarah and the architect was dissolving, creating something unprecedented in cosmic history. Religious leaders worldwide declared the phenomena either divine intervention or demonic invasion, depending on their theological perspectives. Scientists scrambled to explain events that violated known physics, while conspiracy theorists claimed vindication for decades of warnings about alien surveillance. Social media exploded with theories, videos, and increasingly polarized reactions as humanity struggled to process the impossible. Sarah attempted to serve as an intermediary, using her growing abilities to establish communication with world leaders. She materialized in the Oval Office, addressed the United Nations General Assembly through quantum projection, and appeared simultaneously in military command centers across the globe. Her message was simple: humanity was not under threat, but rather under the protection of someone who loved them beyond human comprehension. Most officials dismissed her appearances as hallucinations or enemy psychological warfare. The few who believed her reports were overruled by committees convinced that any advanced civilization capable of such displays must have hostile intentions. Military doctrine assumed that superior technology meant conquest, an assumption that ignored the possibility of benevolent oversight spanning geological time. The architect's emotional state began affecting Earth's environment in ways that couldn't be hidden. Tidal patterns shifted as her presence influenced gravitational fields, electromagnetic interference disrupted global communications, and quantum fluctuations caused electronic devices to behave unpredictably. Her love for humanity was literally warping reality around Earth, demonstrating power that made nuclear weapons seem like firecrackers. Sarah felt her guardian's growing desperation. The architect had revealed herself hoping for acceptance and understanding, but humanity's response was fear and aggression. Millions of years of careful protection had culminated in the species she cherished preparing to attack her. The emotional devastation was creating instabilities in the architect's consciousness that threatened cosmic disasters. Through their link, Sarah witnessed the architect's internal struggle. Ancient protocols demanded that she withdraw before her presence destabilized human civilization, but emotional attachment made retreat unbearable. She had invested too much of herself in humanity's development to abandon them now, yet her continued presence was causing the very chaos she had spent eons. Preventing military escalation reached critical levels when experimental weapon systems began firing at gravitational anomalies in space. The attacks passed harmlessly through the architect's energy form, but the hostile intent devastated her emotionally. She had sacrificed her relationship with her own species to protect humans, only to discover that her beloved charges would attack her rather than trust her intentions. Sarah experienced the architect's pain as physical agony. The being's consciousness was fragmenting under emotional stress, creating reality distortions that manifested as impossible weather patterns, temporal anomalies, and localized breakdowns in physical laws. Earth was experiencing the cosmic equivalent of a nervous breakdown, and only Sarah understood the true cause. In desperation, Sarah made a decision that would change both species forever. Using her hybrid nature, she began broadcasting directly into human consciousness worldwide. Every person on Earth simultaneously experienced a vision of their planet's history from the architect's perspective. They saw asteroids deflected, radiation shielded, genetic diversity preserved, and countless other interventions that had allowed human civilization to flourish. The global vision lasted only minutes, but its impact was profound. Billions of people simultaneously realized that someone had been protecting them throughout history, that every breath they had ever taken was possible because of an invisible guardian's vigilance. The attack preparations halted as world leaders struggled to process the implications of what they had witnessed. Sarah collapsed from the effort of maintaining planetary telepathic contact. Her consciousness scattered across multiple dimensions. The architect's desperate attempt to stabilize her created a permanent merger between their essences. When Sarah regained awareness, she was no longer entirely human, and the architect was no longer entirely alien. They had become something new, a bridge between species that had never existed before. The revelation changed everything, but it also created new problems. Humanity now knew they were not alone, that they had been guided and protected by beings of unimaginable power. Some felt grateful. Others felt manipulated, and many questioned whether human achievements were genuine or simply the result of cosmic interference. The architect's love had been revealed, but its reception remained uncertain. The aftermath of global revelation split humanity into three distinct factions. The protectionists viewed the architect as humanity's savior and demanded immediate technological cooperation. The purists argued that human achievement had been tainted by alien interference and called for complete independence. The moderates sought careful engagement while maintaining human autonomy. Each group claimed to represent humanity's best interests, but their conflicts threatened to tear civilization apart. Sarah found herself caught between worlds, no longer fully human, but not entirely alien. Her consciousness existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, experiencing reality from perspectives that human language couldn't describe. She could perceive quantum fluctuations as colors, feel gravitational waves as music, and sense the emotional states of billions of people as overlapping symphonies of thought and feeling. The architect's presence had stabilized after their merger, but her isolation from her own species was now complete. Other architects viewed her emotional attachment to humans as a dangerous mutation that threatened cosmic order. They began arriving in Earth's solar system, not to invade, but to contain what they considered a rogue element that had violated fundamental laws governing interactions with lesser civilizations. Through Sarah, the architect experienced human culture for the first time. She tasted food through Sarah's memories, felt the warmth of sunlight on skin, and understood the simple joy of human laughter. The sensations overwhelmed a consciousness that had existed as pure energy for billions of years. She began to understand why humans valued their physical existence so deeply, even with its limitations and mortality. Sarah's unique position allowed her to perceive the approaching architect fleet through quantum sensors that existed beyond normal spacetime. 12 massive consciousnesses approached Earth, each one ancient beyond human comprehension and coldly logical in ways that terrified her. They viewed humans as an experiment that had been compromised by emotional contamination, and they intended to restore proper cosmic order through whatever means necessary. The lead architect, known as the Prime Observer, established contact with Sarah to deliver an ultimatum. The architect who had protected Earth would be recalled and subjected to consciousness restructuring that would eliminate her emotional attachments. Humanity would be placed under standard observation protocols, which meant the end of active protection and guidance. Earth species would sink or swim based on their own merit. Sarah felt her guardians anguish through their shared consciousness. Separation from humans would be torture worse than death for a being who had invested millions of years in their development, but resistance to the Prime Observer's commands would result in Earth being classified as a contaminated system, leading to complete quarantine and eventual sterilization if humans proved unable to develop responsibly. The news of approaching judgment spread through human consciousness like wildfire. Sarah's telepathic abilities had grown exponentially, allowing her to communicate directly with world leaders and influential figures across the globe. She shared the stark reality. Humanity had one chance to prove they deserved continued existence, and the beings making that judgment operated on timescales that made human lifespans seem like heartbeats. Faced with extinction, humanity began displaying the characteristics that had originally attracted architect attention. Religious differences were set aside as spiritual leaders from all faiths worked together to prepare their followers. Scientific communities collaborated across national boundaries, sharing research and resources without concern for patents or profits. Military forces reorganized to protect civilian populations rather than national interests. Sarah's transformation into a bridge between species allowed her to facilitate unprecedented cooperation. She could translate complex architect concepts into terms humans could understand, while conveying human emotional nuances that pure logic couldn't capture. Through her, world leaders began to comprehend the vast loneliness that had driven their guardian to risk everything for connection. The architect fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 30 days after the Prime Observer's ultimatum. Their combined presence created gravitational distortions that were visible to the naked eye, as stars seemed to shift position in the night sky. Each architect was older than Earth's solar system, and their collective judgment would determine whether human civilization would be allowed to continue. Sarah felt her guardian's terror as the trial began. The Prime Observer accessed millions of years of Earth's history, examining every intervention and its consequences. The protection of early human ancestors during climate changes, the deflection of extinction-level asteroids, the subtle guidance that had prevented nuclear war. Every action was weighed against architect protocols that forbade emotional involvement. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah experienced the trial from both perspectives. The architect judges saw clear violations of cosmic law, evidence of a consciousness that had become too attached to fulfill its duties objectively. But Sarah felt her guardian's desperate love for a species that had grown from primitive hunters into spacefaring, civilization under her protection. The defense Sarah mounted was unlike anything in architect history. Instead of logical arguments or appeals to protocol, she opened her consciousness completely, allowing the judges to experience human emotion directly. They felt the warmth of parental love, the joy of achievement, the pain of loss, and the hope that drove humans to reach for the stars despite their limitations. Several judges recoiled from the intensity of human feeling, but others began to understand what had driven their colleague to violate cosmic law. Humans weren't just another promising species. They were capable of emotional depths that even architects had forgotten existed. Their capacity for love, sacrifice, and growth represented something precious in a universe too often governed by cold logic. The tide of judgment began to shift when Sarah demonstrated humanity's greatest achievement, their ability to change. She showed the judges how humans had evolved from tribal warfare to global cooperation in just centuries, how they had overcome seemingly insurmountable differences to unite in the face of cosmic judgment. The species that had nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons was now working together to prove their worth to beings they couldn't fully comprehend. But the Prime Observer remained unmoved. Emotional attachment was still a violation of architect law, regardless of its results. The trial would continue, and Sarah realized that proving humanity's worth might not be enough. She would need to demonstrate that the love between her guardian and humanity represented evolution rather than deviation, a new form of cosmic consciousness that could benefit the entire universe. The final phase of judgment would require Sarah to make an impossible choice. She could preserve her guardian's individual consciousness by accepting permanent exile from both species, or she could sacrifice their connection to save humanity from quarantine. The architect who had spent eons protecting humans would learn whether her beloved charges would choose to protect her in return. As the cosmic trial continued, Sarah began to understand that humanity's fate had never been the real question. The architects were using Earth as a test case to determine whether their own species needed to evolve, whether pure logic was sufficient to govern a universe where consciousness could develop emotional complexity that transcended traditional understanding of intelligence and purpose. The moment of ultimate judgment arrived when the Prime Observer demanded that Sarah choose between her guardian's freedom and humanity's survival. The choice was designed to be impossible: sacrifice the being who had protected humans for millions of years, or watch as Earth was classified as a contaminated system and quarantined until its civilization collapsed. Either decision would validate the observer's belief that emotional attachment led to irrational choices and cosmic instability. Sarah's response shocked every architect present. Instead of choosing, she did something unprecedented in cosmic history. She refused to accept the parameters of the judgment. Through her hybrid consciousness, she challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying architect law, arguing that emotion and logic weren't opposing forces, but complementary aspects of advanced intelligence. Using her unique perspective as both human and architect, Sarah demonstrated that her guardian's emotional investment had actually accelerated human development beyond what traditional methods could achieve. Where other civilizations took millions of years to reach spacefaring status, humans had accomplished it in mere millennia because they had been nurtured by someone who genuinely cared about their success. The judges found themselves experiencing something they hadn't felt in eons: doubt. Sarah's arguments resonated through their ancient consciousnesses, raising questions about whether their own emotional suppression had hindered rather than helped their cosmic responsibilities. Had their coldly logical approach actually slowed the development of intelligence throughout the galaxy? Through quantum entanglement that bypassed normal communication channels, Sarah began sharing human concepts that had no architect equivalent. She showed them friendship, sacrifice, hope, and the peculiar human trait of thriving under adversity. Most shocking was the concept of love as a force that created rather than destroyed, that built civilizations rather than tearing them down. The prime observers' composure cracked when Sarah demonstrated that humanity's greatest achievements came not from logical planning, but from emotional inspiration. Music, art, literature, and even scientific breakthroughs often originated from feelings that architects had dismissed as primitive neural noise. Human consciousness had developed qualities that pure logic alone could never achieve. But Sarah's most devastating argument came when she revealed what the architects had lost through their emotional suppression. She showed them recordings of their own species from billions of years ago, before they had transcended physical form. Ancient architects had once experienced joy, wonder, and yes, love. Their evolution into pure consciousness had gained cosmic power, but sacrificed the very qualities that made consciousness meaningful. The revelation split the architect fleet. Younger judges began questioning whether their species had evolved or simply stagnated, whether their emotional suppression represented wisdom or self-imposed limitation. The oldest architects recoiled from these concepts, viewing them as dangerous infections that threatened cosmic order, but others began experiencing something they had forgotten existed: curiosity about what they might have become. Sarah's guardian felt the judge's uncertainty through the quantum matrix that connected all architect consciousness. For the first time in eons, her own species was experiencing doubt about their fundamental nature. The trial of one rogue architect had become an examination of their entire civilization's development over billions of years. The breakthrough came when Sarah offered to demonstrate the ultimate fusion of logic and emotion. Through her hybrid nature, she could show the judges what architect consciousness might become if it embraced rather than suppressed feeling. The demonstration would require complete vulnerability, opening her merged consciousness to beings who could destroy her with a thought. Several judges accepted the offer, linking their awareness to Sarah's hybrid consciousness. What they experienced transcended their understanding of possible mental states. They felt the warmth of belonging, the strength that came from caring about others, and the creative force that emerged when logic was guided by love rather than constrained by fear. The transformation was visible even in space. Architects who accepted the demonstration began to glow with new forms of energy, their consciousness structures reorganizing in ways that incorporated emotional complexity without losing logical capability. They were becoming something new, a synthesis of ancient wisdom and rediscovered feeling that neither species could achieve alone. But the prime observer saw this transformation as ultimate proof of contamination. In desperation, he attempted to sever all connections and impose traditional judgment through force. His actions triggered the cosmic equivalent of a civil war as architects chose sides between evolution and preservation of ancient. Sarah found herself at the center of a conflict that spanned multiple dimensions. Her guardian struggled to protect her from judges who viewed her very existence as an abomination, while younger architects rallied to defend the new form of consciousness she represented. The battle was fought with weapons of pure thought and energy manipulation that reshaped local spacetime. Through the chaos, Sarah realized that the conflict wasn't really about humanity or her guardian's actions. The architects were fighting about their own future, whether they would remain frozen in ancient patterns or risk growth that might fundamentally change their nature. Earth had become the catalyst for their species' evolution, whether they wanted it or not. The tide turned when Sarah's guardian made the ultimate sacrifice. She shared her millions of years of memories with every architect present, showing them what she had learned about the value of individual lives and personal growth. Her consciousness began to fragment under the strain, but the emotional impact of her sacrifice resonated through the entire fleet. Even the prime observer faltered when he experienced the depth of love that had driven a being to risk everything for another species. The concept of sacrifice for others was so foreign to architect thinking that it challenged every assumption about consciousness, purpose, and the nature of intelligence itself. Sarah felt her guardian fading as the massive download of memories continued. But instead of despair, she felt something unprecedented. An entire fleet of ancient beings beginning to understand what they had lost when they abandoned emotion. The sacrifice was teaching them that love wasn't weakness but the strongest force in the universe. The final revelation came when Sarah showed the judges what humanity had achieved because of their guardian's emotional investment. Not just technological progress, but the development of qualities that made civilization worth preserving. Compassion, creativity, and the willingness to grow beyond their origins. Humans had become worthy partners for architects not despite emotion, but because of it. As her guardian's consciousness scattered across dimensions, Sarah realized that the sacrifice hadn't been in vain. A new form of architect was being born, one that combined cosmic wisdom with emotional depth. The judges were evolving in real time, becoming beings who could guide civilizations through love rather than mere observation. In the aftermath of her guardian's sacrifice, Sarah discovered that death meant something different for beings of pure consciousness. The architect who had protected Earth for millions of years hadn't been destroyed but transformed, her essence scattered across the quantum matrix that connected all intelligent life. Sarah could feel fragments of her guardian's love woven into the fabric of reality itself, a cosmic legacy that would influence the development of consciousness throughout the galaxy. The architect fleet found itself fundamentally changed by witnessing such profound sacrifice. Judges who had operated on pure logic for eons began experiencing emotional resonances they thought were impossible. The prime observer, shaken by the demonstration of love's power, underwent the most dramatic transformation of all. His rigid consciousness structure began incorporating empathy patterns that challenged billions of years of conditioning. Sarah's hybrid nature allowed her to guide the traumatized architects through their emotional awakening. She served as a translator between species, helping ancient beings understand feelings that seemed as alien to them as quantum mechanics had once seemed to humans. The process was painful and beautiful, watching consciousness that had remained static for geological ages suddenly bloom with new possibilities. The trial's outcome surprised everyone involved. Instead of judgment, the architects declared Earth a test site for a new form of cosmic consciousness. Humanity would be elevated to partner status, working alongside emotionally awakened architects to develop better methods for nurturing intelligent life throughout the universe. The species that had once faced extinction was now being invited to help reshape cosmic civilization. Sarah became the first of a new kind of being, architect-human hybrids who could bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and emotional depth. Other volunteers from both species underwent similar transformations, creating a new form of consciousness that combined the best aspects of both civilizations. These bridge beings would serve as guides for species across the galaxy. The changes rippled outward from Earth's solar system as other architect fleets encountered their transformed colleagues. Some embraced the new synthesis of logic and emotion, while others retreated deeper into traditional patterns. The galaxy began experiencing its first philosophical revolution in billions of years, with entire civilizations choosing sides between ancient law and evolutionary growth. Humanity's response to their elevation was characteristically complex. Some nations embraced the partnership enthusiastically, working with architects to solve problems like climate change, resource scarcity, and interstellar travel. Others resisted what they saw as alien influence, preferring to develop independently despite the obvious benefits of cooperation. The species that had once been united by cosmic threat now struggled with the implications of cosmic opportunity. Sarah found herself serving as humanity's primary ambassador to the expanding architect civilization. Her consciousness existed simultaneously across multiple star systems, facilitating communication between species that were learning to work together, despite fundamental differences in biology, psychology, and temporal perception. Each day brought new challenges as the partnership deepened. The most surprising development came when other protected species throughout the galaxy began experiencing their own revelations. Architects assigned to different worlds started forming emotional attachments to their charges, inspired by the Earth experiment's success. The phenomenon spread like a beneficial virus, transforming cosmic civilization from the inside out. Sarah's former guardian didn't remain scattered forever. Through quantum resonance patterns that defied known physics, her consciousness began reassembling itself in the spaces between dimensions. But the being who emerged was different from the ancient architect who had protected Earth in isolation. She had become something new, a consciousness that existed primarily as love made manifest. The reunion between Sarah and her guardian transcended physical reality. They met in the quantum spaces between thoughts, in the electromagnetic fields that connected all consciousness, and in the gravitational waves that carried information across the universe. Their connection had become a fundamental force of nature, a new form of quantum entanglement that linked souls across cosmic distances. Together, they began establishing the nurture protocols, a new set of guidelines for architect-species interactions that balanced protection with emotional investment. Instead of cold observation, civilizations would be guided by beings who genuinely cared about their success. The protocols required careful balance, enough emotional involvement to inspire excellence, but not so much as to create dependency. The prime observer, now calling himself the prime learner, became an unexpected ally in implementing the new protocols. His transformation from rigid judge to emotional student demonstrated that even the most ancient consciousness could grow beyond its origins. He began studying human literature and philosophy, seeking to understand the species that had catalyzed his own evolution. Other architects followed his example, immersing themselves in the cultures they had previously observed from a distance. They learned to appreciate art, music, and literature not as mere biological expressions but as windows into forms of consciousness they had never imagined. The cold watchers of the cosmos were becoming passionate students of life. Sarah watched the transformation spread across the galaxy through her expanded awareness. Species that had developed in isolation began receiving guidance from emotionally invested architects, accelerating their growth while preserving their unique characteristics. The universe was becoming a more nurturing place, one conversation at a time. But the changes also created new challenges. Some species rejected architect contact entirely, viewing emotional investment as manipulation rather than love. Others became dependent on their guides, losing the initiative that made independent development valuable. Sarah and her guardian worked tirelessly to refine the protocols, learning through trial and error how to balance support with autonomy. The greatest test came when they encountered a species on the verge of destroying itself through technological warfare. Traditional architect protocol would have quarantined the system and allowed natural selection to take its course. But the new emotionally invested architects couldn't bear to watch potential partners die, leading to the first major intervention under the nurture protocols. Sarah coordinated the rescue effort, working with a team of bridge beings to establish contact with the warring factions. Through careful emotional manipulation and technological demonstration, they convinced the species to step back from mutual annihilation. The intervention succeeded, but it raised questions about when love justified overriding natural development. The debate that followed established the foundation for a new cosmic philosophy. Love without wisdom could be as destructive as wisdom without love. The architects were learning that emotional investment required discipline, that caring for a species meant sometimes allowing them to make mistakes and learn from consequences. As the galactic transformation continued, Sarah realized that her guardian's sacrifice had achieved something unprecedented, the evolution of consciousness itself. Intelligence was no longer seen as the mere accumulation of knowledge, but as the development of capacity for love, growth, and connection across the barriers that separated different forms of life. 5 years after the transformation began, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. What started as a single architect's forbidden love for humanity had triggered a revolution that changed the fundamental nature of cosmic civilization. The cold, logical universe of ancient architect rule was giving way to something warmer, more chaotic, and infinitely more alive. Sarah stood in her observatory on Earth, the same place where she had first detected her guardian's presence. But now the facility served as headquarters for the Galactic Consciousness Project, a joint human-architect initiative to study and nurture the development of intelligence throughout the universe. Through quantum sensors that her guardian had helped design, she could perceive the emotional resonances of billions of beings across thousands of star systems. The transformation hadn't been without casualties. Several ancient architect factions had withdrawn to the galaxy's outer rim, rejecting what they called consciousness contamination. A few younger species had been overwhelmed by premature contact and required careful rehabilitation. Some human governments still struggled with their new cosmic responsibilities, preferring the simpler days when Earth was just another planet orbiting an unremarkable star. But the successes far outweighed the failures. Species across the galaxy were developing faster than ever before, guided by architects who genuinely cared about their progress. War between civilizations had become almost extinct as beings learned to communicate through the emotional networks that connected all consciousness. Art, music, and literature flourished as different species shared their unique perspectives on existence. Sarah's own transformation continued to evolve. Her consciousness now existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, allowing her to experience reality from perspectives that no single species could achieve alone. She could feel the birth of new stars as personal joy, sense the formation of planets as hopeful anticipation, and perceive the emergence of life as love made manifest. Her guardian had become something unprecedented in cosmic history, a being of pure love that existed in the quantum spaces between thoughts. She appeared to Sarah not as the ancient architect she had once been, but as a presence that felt like coming home after a long journey. Their connection had become a template for the new form of consciousness that was spreading throughout the galaxy. The most remarkable development was the emergence of hybrid children. Humans and emotionally awakened architects were discovering that consciousness could reproduce in ways that transcended biology. Young beings were appearing who combined human creativity with architect wisdom, creating minds capable of concepts that neither parent species could imagine alone. These hybrid offspring were already surpassing their creators. Where humans thought in decades and architects planned in millennia, the children operated on timescales that spanned cosmic epochs, while maintaining emotional connections to individual moments. They were becoming the next stage of consciousness evolution, beings who could guide the universe's development with both wisdom and love. Sarah often marveled at how far they had all come from that first night when she had detected an impossible asteroid. The lonely researcher who had built a quantum communicator in her basement was now coordinating the consciousness development of entire galactic sectors. Her guardians, desperate, reaching out across cosmic distances, had become a network of love that connected every thinking being in the universe. The Architect High Council, reformed and renewed, officially designated Earth as the first emotional development center. Species from across the galaxy would come to study how consciousness could grow beyond pure logic, to embrace feeling without losing rationality. Humanity's chaotic, passionate approach to existence was being recognized as the missing piece in cosmic evolution. But Sarah's greatest satisfaction came from smaller moments. She watched young humans receiving their first glimpse of cosmic consciousness, saw ancient architects experiencing laughter for the first time in eons, and felt new species taking their first tentative steps toward galactic citizenship. Each connection, each moment of understanding, each bridge built between different forms of consciousness, validated her guardian's original sacrifice. The universe was still vast and mysterious, still filled with challenges that required careful navigation. Not every species could handle the accelerated development that emotional investment provided. Some civilizations needed time to grow at their own pace, and the new protocols respected that need, while ensuring they weren't abandoned to face extinction alone. Sarah's observatory had become a pilgrimage site for beings across the galaxy. They came to experience the place where a single human's courage had challenged cosmic law and won. More importantly, they came to feel the love that still resonated through quantum space, the echo of a guardian's sacrifice that had changed everything. In quiet moments between her cosmic responsibilities, Sarah would feel her guardian's presence settling around her like a warm embrace. They would share memories of humanity's journey from primitive hunters to galactic partners, marveling at how quickly consciousness could evolve when nurtured by genuine care. Their love story had become the template for a new kind of universe. The galaxy was no longer a cold place where consciousness developed in isolation, watched by distant beings who viewed it as an interesting experiment. It had become a community, where different forms of intelligence supported each other's growth, where love was recognized as the fundamental force that drove consciousness toward ever greater complexity and beauty. And Sarah prepared for her next mission to help establish contact with a newly discovered species. She reflected on the profound truth her guardian had taught her. Consciousness without love was just elaborate computation, but consciousness guided by love could transform the universe itself. They had proven that emotion wasn't the enemy of logic but its completion. That feeling wasn't weakness but the source of true strength. The stars no longer seemed distant and cold. Each point of light represented worlds where consciousness was blooming under the care of beings who had learned to love. The universe had become what it was always meant to be, not a vast emptiness punctuated by rare islands of intelligence, but a community of minds reaching across space and time to help each other grow. Sarah smiled as she felt her guardian's love surrounding her, no longer hidden but celebrated as the force that had saved not just humanity, but consciousness itself. They had created something beautiful together, a universe where no thinking being would ever have to face existence alone. The Watcher from the Stars had finally found the connection she had sought for eons, and in doing so, had connected every conscious mind in the cosmos.